Welcome to DDM 4422 Pro Tools 101. In this video, you will be introduced to the filing structure that Pro Tools uses for its sessions and backups, the steps required to start up a Pro Tools system, and the Pro Tools menu structure. Before you begin anything in Pro Tools, it's helpful to understand how the software works with the various files in our project. When we launch Pro Tools and create a new project from our dashboard, the first thing Pro Tools does is it creates a folder with the name of our project. It does this so that when we proceed to create anything within our project, it can put all of it into this one folder. That way, we know exactly where all the elements of our session are. To ensure everything is managed in an orderly fashion, Pro Tools automatically creates a few files and folders for the various types of assets that we may create, starting with our session file. Using the same name that we have given our project, Pro Tools creates a PTX file inside this project folder. Now, unlike some other DAWs, the Pro Tools session file does not contain any audio. It contains information about our audio. Information like where does the audio clip start, where does it end, what edits have been made, which plugins are being used, or where our fade in and fade out are, etc. If we are working with video, it will contain similar information about the video files. All the audio gets stored in a separate folder called the Audio Files folder. When audio is recorded into a Pro Tools session, each take of the audio recording is stored as a separate file inside this Audio Files folder. Pro Tools can record audio in either the WAV or AIFF formats. In terms of quality, there is no difference between these two formats, as both of these files use raw PCM data to store the audio signals. But people tend to prefer waves because some older Windows systems cannot read AIFF files that easily. This Audio Files folder gets automatically created whenever we create a new session, and along with it, so do other folders and files. Like the Bounce File folder is the default directory that Pro Tools uses for all the files that you bounce. The Clip Groups folder is where Pro Tools will store any of the clip groups that you export from your session. Pro Tools also has an auto backup feature whereby it backs up the session file at regular intervals and stores this backup in the Session File Backups folder. We can turn this feature off and even change the frequency at which these auto backups are performed from the application's preferences window. The Video Files folder is a bit tricky to understand. Pro Tools actually has the ability to record video from an external source directly onto a video track. Of course, you need special hardware to do this, but when it does, the file that gets created is what gets stored in this Video Files folder. But if you're importing a video file, like maybe a QuickTime movie or an Avid video file into Pro Tools, the session file only references the video file in its original location. It does not copy the file over to this folder, which means if your QuickTime file is on an external USB, it will remain in the external USB. And Pro Tools will look for it on the external USB whenever we launch that session. If we unplug the USB, then Pro Tools will be unable to play back the video. So when working with video, it's always good practice to first copy your video file into this Video Files folder and then import it into the session to work with. Pro Tools actually creates a few more folders when needed. A MIDI files folder, which gets created when you export a MIDI clip as a file. A Sibelius files folder, which gets created when you generate a score file for use in Sibelius. And a rendered files folder, which Pro Tools uses to temporarily store the files rendered using a plugin called Elastic Audio. If any of these folders remain empty when we close our session or when we quit Pro Tools, they will automatically be removed from the project folder. Let's see what that looks like. So I'll go ahead and launch Pro Tools. And I'll create a new session called Chapter 2. And let's save this on our desktop just to keep things easy. So once this is created, let's hide Pro Tools and take a look at the desktop. As expected, I see a folder called Chapter 2. And if I enter it, I will see all the files and folders that Pro Tools has made for me. Now, if I quit Pro Tools without doing anything, a lot of these folders which are not used should automatically get deleted. Let's see if that happens. So I'm back in Pro Tools and I head up to the menu and say quit. Yeah, let's save this and now take another look at the session folder. There we go. As expected, most of the folders which got created have been deleted because I never made any content. Let's reopen this session and create some content now just to see what happens. I'll go ahead and create an audio track and I'll call it test. And then just hit record to create an audio recording. Testing 1, 2, 3. If I hop back to my session folder, I can see that all of the folders are back. And the audio recording that I just made is automatically stored in my audio files folder too. If I quit Pro Tools now, you'll see that the audio files folder does not get deleted because there's a file inside it now, but most of the others will be gone again. Let's go ahead and do that. There we go. You would notice that Pro Tools also makes one more file by itself called the wavecache.wfm file. This is actually an interesting file. It's a file that does not contain any audio information. It actually contains graphical information about our audio files, which means it tells Pro Tools what our audio waveforms look like. This information is stored as a separate file so that Pro Tools does not need to calculate and render this every time you open a session. It doesn't take that long to do so when you're working with sessions that do not have that much audio. But imagine working on a film project where you have around 200 audio tracks and thousands of audio files. If Pro Tools had to render the waveform of the audio files every time you open the session, it would be such a waste of time. So, this information is stored separately as a file. When you launch your session, Pro Tools takes the information from the wavecache.wfm file and displays the audio files without needing to render the waveform every single time. Since this file is just graphical information about our audio files, it does not hinder our work, which means if you delete it by mistake, it's no big deal. Pro Tools will recreate this file whenever you reopen the session. Of course, the first time it needs to do this, it'll take a few seconds extra though. This is how Pro Tools manages all of your data in a project. So always remember, if you're moving your session from one computer to another, or perhaps you want to share your session with your friend, or perhaps it's something that you need to submit to us, you will need to copy and share the entire root folder, not just the session file. Because if you share just the PTX file, when it is launched, all of your audio files will be missing, as Pro Tools would actually be looking for the audio files folder to load those. Since Pro Tools systems are typically composed of both hardware and software, Preparing your system for use might involve more than simply turning on your computer and launching the Pro Tools application. The larger the system, the more important it becomes to follow a specific startup sequence. When starting your Pro Tools hardware, it's important to power up the system components in a proper order. Starting components out of sequence could cause a component to not be recognized, prevent the software from launching, or even cause unexpected behavior. The recommended sequence for starting a Pro Tools system is as follows. First, make sure all of your equipment, including your computer, is off. Then, turn on any external hard drives that use an external power supply and wait for about 10 seconds for them to spin up to speed. This step does not apply to hard drives that get their power from the USB port of your computer itself. It's only for drives that have an external power supply. Then, turn on any MIDI interfaces and MIDI devices, including your MIDI control surfaces and synchronization peripherals that you may have. Perhaps you or the studio you're working in has an external sound module or a special clocking device that keeps everything in sync. Now would be the time to turn those on. Next, turn on your audio interface. If it's not a bus-powered one, that is. Audio interfaces take around 15 seconds to initialize, so wait for that much time and then start your computer. And lastly, turn on your audio monitoring system. That's your speakers. While powering down, just follow the opposite sequence. Start with your monitors or speakers, then shut down your computer, then your audio interface, followed by any MIDI devices you may have, and lastly, any hard drives that have an external power supply. This may seem like a trivial procedure to follow every single time, but trust me, it does protect all of your equipment. And as you know, equipment that we like can be expensive. So a little care can go a long way in maximizing our investments. Let's now familiarize ourselves with the Pro Tools software interface. Amongst the first things you see upon launching Pro Tools is the menu system across the top of the screen. Learning how the menus are organized will save you a lot of time when you're trying to find a specific Pro Tools function. The File menu has commands that let you create and maintain Pro Tools sessions. It includes options for opening, closing, creating and saving sessions, bouncing your tracks, and importing and exporting session components. Next, we have the Edit menu. Commands in this menu allow you to edit and manipulate the media that you have currently selected. The Edit menu includes options for copying and pasting, duplicating, repeating and shifting selections, trimming, separating and healing clips, and other similar operations. The View menu has commands that affect what elements are displayed within Pro Tools windows, tracks, and clips. Most View menu commands show or hide parts of the main Pro Tools windows. Next, we have the Track menu, which has commands that let you set up and maintain tracks in your Pro Tools session. The Track menu includes track-based operations such as options for creating, duplicating, grouping, deleting, and modifying tracks. The Clip menu has commands that allow you to work with Pro Tools clips. So if you wanted to loop a particular piece of audio, this is where you can do it from. The Event menu contains commands for modifying the time and tempo settings of your Pro Tools session, for working with MIDI and audio events and operations, and for adjusting various properties of MIDI recordings. So if you wanted to perform a scale change in your song, or perhaps you wish to change the time signature, this is where you can do that from. The Audio Suite menu allows you to access all Audio Suite plugins currently installed with your software. Audio Suite plugins apply non-real-time file-based processing to selections in Pro Tools. Audio suite processing applies an effect permanently, replacing the selection with a newly rendered audio file. The Options menu command lets you toggle several editing, recording, monitoring, playback, and display options. From this menu, you can enable things like loop recording, turn on pre- and post-roll, change your scrolling options, and similar choices. The Setup menu lets you configure various Pro Tools hardware and software parameters. It includes options for configuring your peripheral devices such as audio interfaces, configuring host-based processing options, setting disk allocations, mapping your input-output settings, changing your click or count-off behavior, and modifying your Pro Tools preferences as well. When Pro Tools launches, it will generally be configured to use the currently connected audio interface or other available audio input or output device. If no supported audio interface is found, Pro Tools will launch using the built-in audio capabilities of your computer, meaning it will play back through the built-in speakers on your computer and record through the built-in microphone if they are both available. This can be changed though by choosing Playback Engine from this Setup menu. To configure Pro Tools to use a different audio device, such as a connected USB microphone or a different audio interface perhaps, you will need to change this Playback Engine setting. If you do change your Playback Engine and have a session open, Pro Tools will request you to restart the application so that it can properly reconfigure the session's inputs and outputs with the newly selected hardware. The Playback Engine dialog box is also used to optimize the performance of the standard Pro Tools software. Native Pro Tools systems utilize the computer's processing capacity, called host-based processing, to carry out operations such as recording, playback, mixing, and native plugin processing. While the default system settings are usually adequate for most processing tasks, Pro Tools lets you adjust a system's performance using the hardware buffer size and the dynamic plugin processing settings from this window. Both of these settings directly impact host-based processing tasks. The hardware buffer size setting in the Playback Engine controls host-based tasks such as native plugin processing during recording or live input monitoring. A lower hardware buffer size setting reduces the monitoring latency when you're recording. A higher buffer size setting provides more processing power for tracks that are recording, but at the cost of higher monitoring latency, which means you will notice a delay when you're recording with a higher hardware buffer size. The hardware buffer size setting does not affect DSP processing on hardware accelerated systems though. As explained before, DSP processing is available only on systems with the Pro Tools HDX cards. The dynamic plugin processing option maximizes plugin counts by dynamically reallocating host-based processing resources as needed during playback and recording, which basically means Pro Tools will automatically turn off some of the plugins that are not being used at certain times, so that your system's resources can be put to better use by plugins that need that power. As a general rule, the dynamic plugin processing option should be enabled to ensure optimal performance. Next, we have the Window menu. This menu includes commands that allow you to display various Pro Tools windows. So this is where you can have Pro Tools show or hide the Edit window, the Mix window, the Transport window, the Memory Locations window, and many others. Many people actually get confused between the Window menu and the View menu. Both of these serve distinctly different functions. Commands in the View menu are used to change how certain elements within a window are displayed, but commands in the Window menu actually show or hide entire windows. Which means, if you want to change what you're seeing inside a particular window, you should use the View menu. But if you want to completely show or hide a window, you should use the window menu. Then there's the Avid link, or also known as the Marketplace. This menu provides easy access to your Avid account, the Avid Support Center, and the plugin Marketplace, where you can rent or purchase plugins directly from inside Pro Tools. In fact, plugins that you get from here are available for use without having to even restart Pro Tools. And lastly, the Help menu. The Help menu provides links to important documentation and online resources, including the Pro Tools Online Help System, the Pro Tools Knowledge Base, Avid Audio Forums, the Pro Tools Reference Guide, and much more. But if you guys have a question as you're learning, just come and find me. I'll be your help menu for this semester. So that is the Pro Tools menu system. This brings us to the end of this part. We have covered the Pro Tools file structure, the recommended power up and power down sequence of a Pro Tools setup, and the Pro Tools menu system. Please feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that you have not understood or would like for me to explain again. We can use our channel in Teams to discuss any point that you all wish, so feel free to start a post there that everyone can contribute to and benefit from. And yes, this lecture will also be made available for you to watch again over Moodle, so feel free to log in and watch it at your own pace.